The rand at 7 rand 9 cents this morning, a little bit stronger yesterday, down to around 7 rand 5, 7 rand 6 for those bids, and it really looks like the rand is on steroids at the moment.
Absolutely, Stephen. As you say, it went as far as the 7.5, 7.06 yesterday, and definitely today, if the current positive sentiment improves or continues, we think that a breach of the 7 rand level begins to look increasingly likely.
Of course, we saw the dollar coming under pressure yesterday, and we had retail sales numbers out, 0.4% growth month on month for August, and one might have expected the dollar to have strengthened on positive news like that.
Yes, absolutely, Stephen. I mean, we saw most of the US data yesterday come out better than expected. And in fact, for the last week or so, US data has surprised on the upside. So the reaction was quite strange, but I think it was driven more by market speculation that the Fed is actually planning to increase its purchase of treasuries by as much as $1 trillion at its next meeting. So I think the dollar really came under some pressure on the back of that news.
And of course, we do have that next meeting coming up in the next week or so, I think next week sometime. In the meantime, we're getting some data out of the US today. Are those data going to be factored really into that Fed decision next week? I think we have the US Empire State Manufacturing Index and also industrial production capacity utilization.
Yes, absolutely, Stephen. Manufacturing data out today is most definitely going to filter into the Fed's decision. I mean, those are key indicators for the US economy. But it does seem like that report, the reaction to that report was a bit delayed. It does seem now that the report is about a week old. So I'm not really sure whether that sentiment still remains, given that the data has most recently come out better than expected.
Anything locally yesterday that might have helped to drive the rand stronger? Of course, we did have that gold price rising to a new all-time high, so also lending a little bit of support.
Well, absolutely, Stephen. I mean, most commodities, gold especially, but also platinum did very well yesterday, and that probably helped to drive the rand further. But as I said, you know, every time US data comes out better than expected, and we have that a receding of global growth fears, then emerging markets, and particularly commodity currencies do especially well, and I think that definitely helped the rand yesterday.
We were talking a little bit earlier about the schizophrenia we're seeing in the markets, because we also had some negative data out yesterday, particularly from Germany, where we had that contraction in investor confidence, but we also had industrial production numbers from the EU disappointing the markets as well, and yet the euro strengthening.
Yes, absolutely, Stephen. That definitely is a contrarian reaction, not what one would have expected. But the dollar seemed to take a very hard knock yesterday when that speculation came through that the Fed may increase its asset buying, and so we had that very perverse result happening as far as the euro is concerned. But I do think, I mean, the data was quite old data, and more recent indicators have pointed to an improvement in the growth prospects for the EU, and so that probably also played into that reaction.
Cosatu yesterday proposing an economic overhaul. Any rand reaction from that? Because some of it seems quite radical. So they want to tighten exchange controls to stop the rand depreciating. They also want to tax foreign portfolio inflows to stop the rand from strengthening. So I'm not quite sure where they would like the rand to go.
Yeah, well, Stephen, they've actually said that they'd prefer to see the rand closer to 10 rand to the US dollar. So as you mentioned, some of the measures that they've proposed are for the introduction of a Tobin tax. They're also proposing tighter exchange controls. They want the government to do away with an inflation targeting policy. So quite radical proposals there from Cosatu. But surprisingly, the rand didn't really react. And I think that's because these proposals are still going to be debated at the upcoming policy meeting between the ANC and Cosatu. So at this stage, you know, and government has always stressed that they're willing to debate any sort of suggestions from alliance partners, but there's quite a long process that needs to be followed before such suggestions become policy. So I think that's probably why it didn't weigh on the rand as much as one might have expected.
Of course, while Cosatu would like the rand to weaken to 10, of course, it looks like it could be strengthening to 7. Do you think we could cross below that 7 mark in the coming days?
Absolutely, Stephen. I mean, if today's US data comes out better than expected, in the current environment, we could see the rand definitely breach that 7 rand level. We wouldn't be surprised to see that movement at all.